I have 9:30.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Western Municipal Water District's regular board meeting for March 2nd at 9:30. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order this morning. Madam Secretary, could you go ahead and read in our COVID protocols for today, please?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Pursuant to Western Municipal Water District Resolution 3209, in an effort to protect the public health, prevent the spread of COVID-19, and because state and local officials are recommending measures to promote social distancing, the public may view this board meeting online or virtually via Zoom. As stated on the agenda, members of the public who wish to comment on any item within the jurisdiction of the district or any item on the agenda may make comments in person, virtually via Zoom, or by submitting comments on the district's website. Comments received on the district's website before 4:30 p.m. March 1st, 2022 will be made part of the board meeting record. For those participating in the Zoom virtual meeting who wish to provide public comments, please indicate such by using the raise hand feature, and we will call on you individually. You can access the raise hand feature by opening the participant list and clicking the raised hand button at the bottom of the list. For those participating by telephone who wish to provide public comment, you may do so by pressing *6 to unmute yourself. Phone callers may also press *9 to activate the raise hand feature. If there is more than one caller, you will be identified and called on one at a time. Any public comment will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. However, the presiding officer reserves the right to reduce the amount of time you will be allowed to speak to ensure that all members of the public have an opportunity to provide their comment. I will now take roll call for the meeting. Due to the complexity of conducting this meeting by Zoom and telephonically, I will not be taking roll call for staff members or the public at this time. Director Roten.
I am here. Good morning.
Good morning. Director Rizvi.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning. Director Gardner.
I am here.
Thank you. Good morning. Director Torres.
I'm here.
Thank you. Good morning. President Dinstedt.
I am present. Good morning.
Good morning. President Dinstedt, you do have a quorum today.
Thank you very much. And before we begin with our Pledge of Allegiance, folks, I just want to do a reminder for the folks up at the dais and in our audience today, if you have a cell phone, if you could set that on silence or stun, we would appreciate that. And today we have Albert here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone could please join him.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Albert Magallon, Field Operations Manager, Water Quality for Operations. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Albert, how many years have you been working for Western?
22 years.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Amen.
Yay.
And we appreciate your service to the district. And thank you so much for being here today to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When he was 12.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right?
so you get him early. He was
Absolutely.
part of the elementary school program.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Albert.
Yep, I met Albert first time out at Ops years and years ago, so he's been a very familiar face to me, so I wanted to call out because I knew how long he'd
And we have a tour that I assume Albert is going to be participating in at Arlington DeSalter on Monday for the board. So you'll see, I assume you'll see Albert again.
There we go. Great.
President Denstead?
Yes.
A couple of introductions before we get started. Holland Stewart is here representing BB&K. Jeff Ballinger couldn't be with us today.
Good morning.
So he's capably filling in for, well, hopefully capably. We'll see how it
Well,
goes.
we'll see.
But
We'll
he's
see what
off-
happens. Anything is possible.
He's
today.
off to a good start. He was here on time.
Okay,
so
great. There we go.
Gold star for him. And then I also wanted to welcome Sarah McDonald to sit up here. So legal counsel never had support from that flank before. Since Jeff Sims left, we haven't had anyone sitting in that seat. And now that Sarah is AGM here at Western, I've asked her to come sit up on the dais.
Fantastic. Well, welcome, and we look forward to Sarah's participation in the future here. And I guess you're a fill-in for today, but welcome. So, okay. Are you all done with your intros?
Thank you very much.
All
I am
righty.
finished.
All right, we'll go ahead and move right into public comment today, folks. Now is the time for public comment for any item which is not currently posted on our agenda under the jurisdiction of this agency to be able to act upon. And Madam Secretary, do we have anybody who wishes to comment under public comment today?
President Dinstead, I see no hands raised on Zoom. We have no members in the audience requesting to speak, and we've received no written comments this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move forward on our agenda to our consent calendar. Is there any member of the board who has any question on any consent calendar item? Any member of the public who wishes to comment on any consent calendar item?
I see none.
Looking for a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Director Rizvi and a second by Director Gardner. Madam Secretary, could we go ahead and call for the vote, please?
Thank you. Director Roten,
Yes.
Director Rizvi,
Yes.
Director Gardner,
Yes.
Director Torres,
Yes.
President Dinstead.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. Moving on to items to be added to our agenda today. Mr. Miller, anything to add to our agenda?
Nothing to add today.
Okay, now this is where legal counsel gets to show his
Let's see how he does.
Yes. Legal counsel, anything to add to our agenda today? No. Thank you very much. Moving on to our action agenda this morning, we'll move on to 7A, which is a report from our investment manager.
All right, thank you, President Denstead. I see Rod online. Rod, would you like to introduce our presenter today?
Well, actually, I think Anna was going to pull off this introduction, but we have Chandler Asset Management with us this morning to make our presentation on our investments. And so with that, Chandler gets to take it over.
Good morning and thank you. My name is Daniel Delaney, and I'm sure many of you have met me virtually before. But just to start, to thank you for your support for myself and for Chandler. It's really a privilege to manage your accounts. There's a slide deck that we have here. I'm going to keep it fairly brief, and obviously, please do interject with any questions you have, or we can address them at the end. I was going to start with an outlook or to give a backdrop, if you like, of the economy, what the Fed is doing or thinking of doing, and the market, and then talk a bit about how that is translating into your portfolios. So perhaps if we could turn to the next slide and the one after, and one more time. Okay, so to talk a bit about the economy and specifically the growth outlook, the US is, of course, a consumer-driven economy for the most part. So we really do look at jobs and job creation, which has been really strong of late. If you look at the last 3 months, including January, which isn't included in the slide, then we've been generating around 500,000 in payrolls on average every month. That's a really healthy clip. But we're still around 2.5 million jobs shy of where we were before the pandemic. So there's good momentum and there's room for more growth. And that, of course, makes the consumer feel pretty good that they're managing to get into these jobs and that there's more room to run. The next slide on inflation. This is becoming a bit more of a concern, as we all know. The latest print for the consumer price index in January was even higher than the one that we showed here of 7%. It came in at 7.5%. And the Federal Reserve's preferred measure of inflation, which is the personal consumption expenditures index, it's a bit more realistic basket of goods that consumers buy and allows for substitution, is still coming in very high at 5.2%. So these are very, very high numbers that we're all aware of. What's driving that for the most part are items that have been most acutely affected by the pandemic, of course. So think about car values, both new cars and used cars. and but also it's starting to creep into other sectors of the economy. So housing would be one, and we're starting to see obviously house prices continue to escalate, which is feeding in through to rents, and rents is a big portion of consumers' expenditure. So these measures are high. We think that they will moderate as the year progresses, particularly as some of these supply chain deficiencies become less acute, but also as other areas of the economy, such as the housing market, cools. And that is certainly going to be a function of one, prices being where they are, and two, mortgage rates increasing. So we do see inflation moderating throughout the course of this year, but it's likely to remain above where it was pre-pandemic. And then the next slide, please. This is about the Federal Reserve and what's their reaction function to both growth and inflation. Well, we've been living in an environment where the Fed has employed all of these emergency measures, which it really doesn't need to anymore, because growth is so robust and because inflation is becoming a problem. So the Fed has decided that it will reduce its balance sheet. So it doesn't need to be buying billions of dollars worth of bonds every month. And it's going to start increasing interest rates. And it'll do so, we believe, in a very gradual fashion. I think the Federal Reserve of this era is very different to prior eras, maybe 20, 30 years ago, when they are far more concerned about inflation. We think the Federal Reserve of this era is kind of more like a doctor, do no harm. And we don't feel as though they will do harm to the underlying economy, just given how we've come out of this pandemic, and there's still definitely risks to growth from COVID, but also more recently from what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. So we think that the Fed will be very methodical in its interest rate rises, perhaps more so than the market gives it credit for. The next slide. So how is this translating into bond yields? And we show here various different maturities of US Treasuries, 2-year, 5-year, and 10-year bonds. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the curve. So yields have been going up. And on the one hand, this is negatively affecting bond prices. And that, we never like looking at our statements and seeing, a decline in market value. But as I said, we are getting out of this emergency environment, an environment where yields have been so low, which is a negative for clients like yourself and for many other savers and investors. So high yields is a good thing. If yields rise in an orderly fashion, it means that future returns are going to be better for us. So we're happy about that. We don't like yields when they're close to zero. One thing that I would point out is the shape of the curve. This is a very widely followed market indicator. We like to see a curve that is upward sloping. Ultimately, we don't like to see when front-end yields, so 2-year treasuries, for example, rise so much that they go higher than 10-year yields. And why? It's the transmission mechanism for banks. Banks like to borrow short-term and lend long-term. And when short-term rates become as high as long-term rates, they don't want to lend anymore. And when the curve flatlines or even becomes inverted, that's when you typically see downturns in the economy and recessions. So we're not there yet, but it has been trending in that fashion, partly because expectations are for the Fed to be very aggressive. We don't think that happens, and we think the curve reasserts itself and steepens somewhat. But that would be one indicator, perhaps for yourselves to follow, and of course we'll keep you updated on how that evolves. And the next slide, please. And the one after. So the governing objectives for our accounts are always safety, liquidity, and then lastly, return. And you can see that we've referenced the benchmark that we manage for the operating reserve fund, which is a 1 to 10-year treasury and agency index. So that's our guide. And then around that, what we try and do is build portfolios that are very diversified and include many high quality securities to generate an above average or an above index return year after year. And the next slide, please. This is very important. We issue this every month. The compliance statement goes out. We want to make sure that we are in compliance with 1, California code, and 2, with any specifics of your investment policy. And you can see by every category that we are in compliance. What I will say is that the investment policy put forward by WesternMWD uses all of the bandwidth that is allowed by California code. And we love that. We love to be able to have as much flexibility as is allowed in order to generate those incremental returns for your portfolio. So nothing to highlight that. And the next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the portfolio as at the end of December, which seems a long way off now, but you can see there the various different characteristics. The maturity of the benchmark, which is very similar to the durational interest rate sensitivity, is around 4 years. And we keep the portfolio very much in line with the benchmark. We don't make big bets on the direction of interest rates. Like I said, we try and build diversified portfolios and invest into different sectors and let that generate our incremental returns. Consistently being able to gauge where interest rates is going, I've done this for 16, 17 years, is very difficult to get right all the time. So that's not what we're in the business of doing. You can see there the average market yields have been increasing, as I showed on the prior slide, as treasury yields have been rising. Again, that's a good thing because we're getting off that 0 level. And the average quality of the credit portfolio is extremely high, AA rated, so almost at the highest AAA rating. The market value did decline slightly from the third quarter to the fourth because of the rise in interest rates. I think currently now, because of some contributions, the portfolio is sitting at around $221 million. The next slide, please. So here we show the snapshot of the portfolio as at the end of December and the third quarter. And this is really how we diversify by different asset classes. So of course, we have a very healthy amount of highly liquid, very high quality US Treasuries, around 26%, and agency or government guaranteed securities around 30%. Then around that, we invest in sectors like asset-backed securities, mortgages, corporate bonds, which provide us with that incremental return. Not really too much has changed. Where we've seen opportunities in the fourth quarter and actually into this year have been on the securitized market. So we think about auto loans and leases that are securitized. That's been a great trade, I think, because car prices have gone up so much that the collateral value of those securitizations is so robust. Similarly, on the mortgage side, with the rise in property values, again, that collateral value, particularly against an inflationary backdrop, we think provides a good amount of protection. Corporate bonds, offer good value. I would say that corporate bond spreads are normalizing from very tight historical levels. So we have seen some opportunities there, but more so in the other markets that I mentioned. But the key point here is really staying diversified and not putting too many eggs in one basket, and certainly keeping a very high portion of the portfolio in liquid treasury and agency bonds. And next slide, please. This is a historical graph and table of the returns. So you can see that in the past 3 months returns and 12 months returns have been fairly negative. I mean, this has been one of the worst years, or last year was 2021, for the bond market in recent history because of the rise in interest rates from a very low level. So the portfolio generated a return of minus 0.6%, slightly underperforming its benchmark in the fourth quarter, and came around about even versus its benchmark, but down 1.6% for the year. But I really like to draw your attention to the longer term track record. And I know that you look at this and these are the returns that we expect to generate in future years. Very solid, consistent returns that exceed the benchmark. And so the message here is really not to get too caught up in the current environment and really stay long-term focused. And the next slide, please. Here's a snapshot of all the portfolio's holdings. The key message here is that we're very diversified. We don't have, again, too many eggs in one basket, particularly when we're looking at corporate issuers. You can see that our top corporate issuers there are under 2%, and you'll recognize many blue chip names, including banks, very strong banks like JP Morgan and Bank of America. As it relates to the current tragic situation between Russia and Ukraine, of course, we don't own any corporates in that part of the world. Some of the holdings that we have will have a minimal amount of exposure to that part of the world. If you think about Apple, they generate probably 1 to 2% of their revenues from Russia. Certain banks will have some loans in that part of the world, but nothing material, nothing that would cause us to be worried about the credit quality or the solvency of any of these names. And we do our due diligence every time we see one of these events. We scour the portfolio and make sure that we're not missing anything. The next slide, please. And the next one. Yeah, nothing much to say here. There's a small amount in the lay fund. The next slide. We can talk about the Viva Trust. So this is the governing policy for the Viva Trust, and you can see the different bands for the different asset classes. And as of the end of December and as of now, the Viva Trust is in full compliance with that. And the next slide. And this is the breakout of the fund. It's roughly 60-40% equities, bonds, and real estate. And what I would say is real estate has been a great investment in the current climate, protecting against inflation. We, of course, put forward our capital market allocation, capital market assumptions annually, and that governs the asset allocation, albeit within the bands that I showed before. And then we rebalance on a quarterly basis, but really from quarter to quarter, not much changes in terms of our allocations. And the next slide. And you can see that here, versus the third quarter of the year, it's, maybe 1% differential by asset class, just to make sure that we're staying within that asset allocation framework. The next slide. These are the returns, the historical returns for the Viva account, which has done, I would say, exceptionally well. I know that there's a governing target return for this account of around 7%, and it's consistently outperformed that return target. Of course, the returns last year and the year before have been nothing but stellar for stocks. In an environment where you do have the Fed increasing interest rates, so financial conditions become a little bit tighter, I would just temper those return expectations going forward. But again, as longer term investors, we're still very much comfortable with that return assumption and being able to hit that. And the next slide. Well, that may be it. That's it. So I'm open for any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Really appreciate it. Back to the board for questions.
Thank you. Questions, anyone?
Madam President, not a question, but Daniel touched on it, but I think it's really important that anyone who is following our investment portfolio recognize that it is a long-term investment, and they shouldn't get too excited if it spikes up or drops down in any particular year or quarter. Overall, we are doing quite well with the investment portfolio and with our investment managers, and I'm pleased by that. You get thrilled if you have a really good year, a really good quarter. You say, "Oh, look, we made 40%." But you have to know that's not going to continue. And if you lose 20% in 1 year, that's really not a big deal for long-term investments. What you're looking at is your long-term averages, and we're doing well. So I would just urge everybody to not get excited by the slight drop in the portfolio value that's reflected in this report. It's only a loss if you sell, and we're not selling.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, any other questions, comments? No?
Move to
Question?
approve.
Yeah, this is a receive and file. Do we need to?
We do need to take a vote.
Okay. Before we do that, and I have a motion to approve, I wanted to point out just a couple of things that I was going to ask questions on, and thank you so much for touching on those in relationship to what's going on with Russia and all of the volatility and possibly things going on in the market and the fluctuations. I think that was, thank you for addressing those, and that we are very particular about our investment policy and that you take an active role examining that when we have major world incidents that could affect market volatility. So appreciate that. And I also appreciate that you review our investment policy. The district takes that very seriously. This is our customer money, and this is what we do to protect the district. So we make sure that our investment policies are in tune with all of the standards out there for the state and for what we feel is appropriate, and staff has done an excellent job advising us over the years to make sure that we're setting appropriate policy forward to do exactly that. So thank you for pointing out and highlighting those particular things. And we certainly have appreciated our partnership with you, Chandler Asset Management, for many, many years. It has proven to be a very important partnership that we have, and has improved our credit rating over the years and has really strengthened our position. So certainly appreciate our partnership. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for your comments and your support.
Absolutely. I had a motion to receive and file.
I'll second.
And a second from Director Gardner. And is there any public comment on this item?
I see none.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
Director Gardner?
Yes.
Director Torres?
Yes.
President Dinstedt?
Yes,
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
very much. And thank you so much for being here today, sir. We certainly appreciate your presentation.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Thank you. You as well. Okay, moving on to 7B for consideration of the nomination of Andy Morris from one of our sister agencies to the insurance fund for the March JPIA. For the Aqua JPIA, sorry.
This resolution is just for Aqua. He may want to do something at March in the future, but. Yes, this is, we took this, or I mentioned this to our ComGov committee, that we're bringing forward a resolution to support Andy Morris, who is a board member at Elsinore Valley, in addition to being a board member for the SIRA board. The nomination came through SIRA. That's why he's listed as a SIRA board member on here, not an Elsinore Valley board member, but he is both. We've had a long relationship working with Andy, a long positive relationship, and we're bringing this forward to the board to show support for him to continue to be on the Aqua JPIA board.
Okay, thank you. And Director Rizvi, did you have any comments in regard to Andy, since you sit on SIRA board?
Since I sit on SORA board, I fully support his nomination, and I would like to make the motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a motion from Director Rizvi and a second from Director Torres. Madam Secretary, any public comment on this item?
We have none.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments from members of the board? Okay, we'll go ahead and call for that vote.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
Director Gardner?
Yes.
Director Torres?
Yes.
President Dinstedt?
Yes,
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
thank you very much. And moving on to 7C, this is also another nomination for a longstanding board member and representative to LAFCO, Phil Williams. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, very similar to the last item, Resolution 3213, nominating Elsinore Valley's Director Phil Williams to remain at LAFCO as a representative. He was rather instrumental in our LAFCO MSR in getting that through the LAFCO board. He's served LAFCO well, and it's always nice to have one of our member agencies participating. And so our recommendation to the board is that we approve the resolution for Phil Williams.
Thank you very much. Any comments from any members of the board?
I would like to approve this. Make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Director Rizvi and a second by Director Gardner. Any public comments on this item, Madam Secretary?
I see none.
Thank you very much. Any further comments from members of the board? Okay, we'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Thank you. Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
Director Gardner?
Yes.
Director Torres?
Yes.
President Dinstead?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to reports on our agenda. First report up is from Visiting General Counsel. Good morning, sir.
Morning. Nothing to report from my end. The firm has been circulating some emails about agency's continued ability to host virtual meetings. So we got some emails about it yesterday. Essentially, the long and short of it is we can continue to do so, regardless of any rollbacks of executive orders. The code sections are a little less than clear, but so long as the agency makes the right findings, it's not going to be sort of an edict from the state. It's going to be an agency-by-agency decision. So Jeff, when we talked yesterday, he said just make sure that you guys knew that regardless of what's happening in Sacramento, you guys can continue to do remote meetings and or hybrid meetings like you do.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, moving on to Mr. Miller, General Manager report.
I have a few, and I'm going to lead off with a report from Kevin Mascaro on our customer past due collection efforts. So you've been hearing about arrearages for a long time now, and actually we're doing very well, and our staff has done a very, very good job of mitigating rolling back into our collections process. And so Kevin's going to give us an update on how that's been going.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. But just to go back a little bit, Albert has left, but I just wanted to mention Albert Magalon is one of the reasons why Western is a great place to work. He's an operations field manager. We're up here in customer service. There have been times that we've desperately needed some field help. You call Albert and boom, you have someone right there to help. So, and he does it with a great smile and a great attitude. And so I've expressed that to him privately over time, but I wanted to mention that publicly. He is a reason why Western is a great place to work. What a great servant and really a humble leader. So,
Well, and his exit was just untimely. He needed to stay here for a
Right,
couple more minutes, so. But we appreciate him getting back to work.
And he does that so well. Let's go ahead and look at the first slide here. This is just a real quick recap of the state's water and wastewater arrearage payment program. You'll recall phase one was for water. We got almost $600,000 to help out over 660 eligible accounts. Great news there. And so that all got credited toward the end of December. Well, the state's phase two part is with wastewater or sewer arrearages, and the application period opened right at the beginning of February. We got our application in right away. Yes, it's a smaller dollar amount. Why is it so small? Well, we have two reasons. We have 9,000 wastewater customers or sewer customers, 24,000 water. Also, when a couple months go by, people start paying off their bill, you know. So, but still, we're optimistic we'll get all 45,000 and help out those accounts as well. So, it's a quick recap on what's going on with the arrearage program. So, how's Western doing with our past due balances? That's on the next slide. This graph is a week old, but I could just add some more colors to the right-hand side in the downward direction. Mm-hmm. So this has been really good news. You can easily guess where we credited the state's arrearage money. It plummeted by half in some cases. But even since this slide, which was from a week ago, we've seen 15% more drop in the number of customers that are past due, also in the dollar amount as well. So we're down to $265,000. That is 60 days or more past due, about 400 customers. So, and we're continuing to see that trend. Now, you may say, why? Well, I'll refresh your memory. Let's look at the next slide. In December, we reinstituted, based on board action in October, in December, we reinstituted our past due recovery process. Okay? What that means is all the different notices and then the ultimate shutoff became back into effect. And the first bill that was issued in December is associated with cycle 4. Sorry, it's not cycle 1, but it's cycle 4. And cycle 4 was that first group, about 5,900 customers. We have 4 cycles we bill each week. And so they started getting their the various notices. So what I'm trying to communicate on the right-hand side of this graph is that the numbers drop the more you notify people that they're past due. No big surprise. But we've seen this trend for cycle 4, also for cycle 1, so and then cycle 2 as well. So what you're seeing here is about 1,000 customers out of the 6,000 got notice 1, which is a voicemail and an email. Then, what is it? I have it down here. It's 12 days later, they get another voicemail and email. And you can see the number drops by about half, okay? Notice number 3 is a mailed notice. That's 15 days after notice number 2. Again, you see about another half dropping off the list, which is great. We like that trend. And then the final notice, number 4, that's where they get the FedEx notice. That was pretty close, that's 13 days later. That's close to about half or so as well. And then you get the ultimate, right? The ultimate notification is your water is shut off. And that quantity dropped by 75%. Wow. So, which makes sense. So in some cases, people may be waiting more till right toward the last minute. Now, what's interesting about all this is that, or at least to me, is that this is all part of the SB 998 law that went into effect that added additional notifications to customers. It extended the timeline from when you become noticed and then ultimately be shut off. But that went into effect early 2020, right before the pandemic, when we stopped all the noticing and and all the shutoffs. And so we never really got to see whether this is effective or not. And we are seeing that it is. And so getting that little extra time, getting a few extra notices has been helpful. Now you may ask yourself, well, 40 customers, and we've had, so that was 3 weeks ago, 29 customers last week, just found out 28 customers actually this morning. How does that compare to pre-COVID period of time? So we looked at 3 calendar years, 2017, 18, and 19. The weekly average number of shutoffs, 39. Oh. So I was shocked because I thought, well, certainly we'll have double, triple, quadruple, something like that. So that's real positive news. Now, having anyone on the shutoff list is, nothing we want, of course. But we're so pleased that it's not a dramatically higher number. And so that's been, that's positive news there too. So let's look at the next slide. We've seen this content before, but we continue to provide outreach to our customers in a variety of different avenues. And of course, we're continuing to talk to people, of course, all the way certainly heavily today and yesterday, about the past due recovery process, that you can get a payment arrangement. Western has its own bill payment assistance programs. There's other programs available through the state. Wanted to mention that as of today, we have just a little over 115 payment arrangements. We also thought that number would be substantially higher, but 117, that covers about $95,000 or about $800 per account. So next week, though, the number in that cycle is our largest cycle. It's about 70% higher than the first 3 cycles. We'll see what those numbers are. Likely they'll be proportionally higher, but who knows? We'll see. They've had a little bit more time than maybe others with all the messaging. So we'll report back on how the 4th week of shutoffs, which would complete our 4-cycle process. So next slide, and that concludes presentation, and certainly open to any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions?
No question, but great job. This looks good.
Okay. Questions?
Oh, I don't have any questions.
Oh.
I have more.
You
I
were
have
leaning
more
in.
Updates, but I'll wait till you
Okay.
ask Kevin questions.
Hold on, we're not, I've looked at one
I'm
side,
leaning
I
in
haven't
because
looked
I'm
at the other
trying to
side.
figure out if I'm going again now.
I haven't looked at the other side. Any questions?
No question, but thank you so much for how hard and diligently you're working on this.
Our pleasure. Certainly.
Okay. One question that I have is, I think this is great because we're at the point where this is all kind of pre-pandemic numbers, so we've really been able to provide a lot of assistance. As far as Western's customer assistance program, what are we looking at numbers-wise for people that have taken advantage of that opportunity, and how are funds sitting in there? Is that still?
Yeah, world record. So normally we had 25,000 a year, and then we increased it to $100,000 for these 2 last fiscal years. Well, it wasn't taken advantage of much last fiscal year or the first half of this year, but all of a sudden, we crested the normal 25,000. So Teresa, our customer service manager, was telling me last week that we breached at least the 25,000 that we normally have targeted. And that money is, the remaining money is certainly still available. Every person who calls in to talk about their bill and their concern about being able to pay, that's the first thing we mention, because that's $150 that can come right off the top. So, and then we mention the other external programs as well.
That's great. No, it's good to hear that fund is now being at least utilized by customers who really need it, and that's what its intention was. So glad to hear that there's still available funds in there for people to be able to still remain, even if it's not pandemic related. That's not what it's designed to do. It's designed to help our customers who are having a hard time meeting their bills and qualify under that threshold. So thank you very much. Appreciate the updates, and we keep plugging forward. So
Staff's pleasure. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Mr. Miller, now it's all you.
Thank goodness. It's always Kevin's show. It's nice when he shares. I have two more updates. So the first one is a Metropolitan Water District Annexation 41st Fringe area update. So I don't know if that means anything to anyone other than, all of us engineering and development people, but it probably means something to Director Denstad. So Metropolitan has a rule that if you're going to serve Metropolitan water to customers, they have to annex into Metropolitan service area, and they have to pay an annexation fee because they have to buy into all of the investment that Metropolitan has made to bring water to this area. And so they can't just skate on the investment that everyone else paid for. Everybody has to pay their fair share. So when a city, in general terms, when a city wants to start taking Met water, they have to pay an annexation fee. Well, years ago, 20 years ago, Metropolitan worked a special deal with Western to say that the Marietta area can pay their annexation fees as they go. So parcel by parcel can pay an annexation fee. That's something the Metropolitan, to my knowledge, has not done for anybody else. So that was a benefit to the Marietta area, I think because they weren't sure at the rate that it was going to grow and develop. And the overall annexation fee that's still owed is $12 million. So back 20 years ago, it was much higher than that. So they would have had to come up with a substantial amount of money one time to annex into Metropolitan's service area. So we worked out this deal on behalf of Marietta and Western to pay as you go. Well, that deal expires in 2025. So without some sort of new arrangement, we would have owed $12 million in 2025. So because of the hard work of Ryan Shaw and Tim and a lot of lobbying with Met staff, they've agreed to extend that deal for another 10 years, which is great. That gives the city time to develop and plan and pay off those annexations as we go. So that's really good news. We had this due date coming. We weren't sure how we were going to deal with that. So this is really good news for Marietta and good news for Metropolitan, and we appreciate Metropolitan's assistance. They certainly didn't need to extend that, but they are working with their member agencies whenever they can to help us out. So great news there. The last update I have is...
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
How are we communicating this to the city?
We just found out,
Okay.
but we will be communicating that first to the city staff. So this will go through the city manager and through their development services group. They're the only ones really that know it's happening, and then they'll reach out to the development community. There are developers in Marietta that know about this, landholders that know they have this annexation obligation if they're going to develop their properties. So they're aware of it. So this will start filtering out through those developers also.
Great, thank you.
It doesn't relieve them from paying the annexation fee. So it's really good news for the city, because the city would have to pay the lump sum fee. So it's really better news for the city than I think for the developers, because they still have to pay their fair share. That's it? Okay. The last one I want to give an update on is a movement that we've started. We're calling it Big Water Now. And you've heard me talk about this at Aqua. I've talked about it at Met. I've talked about it at CMUA. I've talked about it to the Met managers, really all over the place. And this is a growing group of general managers, and it's growing rapidly. So I presented this to our local GMs 2 weeks ago. They all said, we're behind you 100%. Where do we go from here? So this Friday, I have about 25 general managers from across the state. We're getting Central Valley Ag that is interested and is going to listen in. But this is going to be a full court press on legislators and the administration that we need to prioritize water supply development. So for 2 decades now, the state has been focused on demand management. So what's the solution? In the state's mind, the solution to the drought is efficiency and conservation. And you locals need to take responsibility for this and build recycled water projects. And that'll solve the problem. Well, for Western, that's not going to solve the problem. We already have full recycled water program at WRF, and we don't have enough sewage. So we're fully utilizing all of our recycled water. So building a new recycled water project, we can't. There's no recycled water. So our future is not solving our supply issues through recycled water. And if you go to RCRA, we're working on a recycled water program at RCRA. We've been working a long time at this. It really is just changing who's recycling the supply. We recycle it and we discharge it into the Santa Ana River. Orange County Water District captures almost every drop of that, puts it in the ground, and they recycle it. Well, we're changing that. We're going to recycle it upstream for our own use first. And then it'll ultimately go downstream, and Orange County will get it. But again, building a new recycled water project does not help supplies to our Southern California region. It just shifts it around. When we reuse water at RCRA in Chino Basin for our own uses, or in Corona or in Norco, that means Orange County is going to get less. Orange County has to go out on the market and import more water now. Rather than us importing water, it shifts to them. They'll import water. So it's a zero-sum game. The state doesn't seem to recognize what they're asking us to do. And what's happening is all of the water managers talk to one another and they say, when is the state going to wake up that this is not going to work? So now that we have a zero allocation, it's moved to 15% on the state project. The Central Valley project, which is a federal project, just released a zero allocation for ag customers. So we got relief. We were like, woo, we got 15% allocation. All is good. No, 15's terrible. It's out of zero, but they're already making rumblings that zero is back on the table because January and February have been so dry. So the water managers, it's our responsibility to plan for our customers' future. And we're planning for our customers' grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Western's here forever, and the state seems intent on fixing drought this year. And that's not our job. So all the general managers feel this huge weight on their shoulders that we need a long-term fix, and we need to get over this climate resiliency issue, because how it's playing out is that dry periods are hotter and drier, wet periods are wetter. Our system of capture on the state project does not accommodate faster flows, more flashy flows, higher rain, less snow. Our reservoirs at Oroville and Shasta and San Luis and all the other reservoirs that the state counts on, they have not increased supply at all. they've gone the opposite direction and decreased supply and decreased the ability to move water around because of regulatory restrictions. And so this movement is trying to elevate the dire need to have the state increase storage, increase transport of water, conveyance, you hear it as conveyance, the tunnels, it's other things, and fix the regulatory environment so that when it's wet, we can move every drop of water throughout the state. And you've heard of SGMA, right? This is the state said, hey, we're going to fix water. We're going to control groundwater pumping, primarily in the Central Valley, because in Southern California, we already have groundwater managers and adjudicated basins, so it doesn't really affect us. But the state kind of, washed their hands, patted themselves on the back and said, well, we fixed it. We implemented SGMA. Well, think about, what are all those Central Valley ag agencies going to do? So now they can't get water from the state project or the federal project, so they have to pump groundwater or stop their ag production. Well, SGMA says you have to be able to operate sustainably for the long term. So that means you have to balance whatever you're taking out of the ground with putting something back in. But because the basins are so low, you actually have to put more in than you're taking out now to catch back up. Well, what water are they putting in? There's zero water available. So their solution of, hey, we told you to balance, but we're not going to provide you any water, that's only driving the state towards diminishing ag production in the Central Valley. I don't know that that's good for the state. I don't know that they understand that. So it's a huge effort. It's growing. It's getting a lot of momentum. We've asked KP, our state advocates, to weigh in, and they've prepared a program that I'll be presenting to the water managers on Friday to really start a campaign. And this is really, it's like a campaign, like a bond campaign, but we don't have an ask of a bond measure or any sort of legislation because the state has all kinds of money in reserves right now. So we don't need money. The state has the money to fix everything. So it's trying to convince the administration and the legislature that they need to spend this on the foundational element of our economy in the state, which is water. So there, I was on my soapbox for a couple minutes, but I want the board to know that this is going on. I've yet to have one general manager that's heard this say, I disagree. So I think we're going to have a big push by all the general managers. I've talked to Met about this. Met says we 100% agree. And so it's going to move. I think it's going to really move. So that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay, well, Mr. Miller, I think you've given us a lot of information and a lot of things to push forward and communicate forward to people we come in contact with, too, to talk about this and what it means, so.
And as this matures, that is an important part of the game plan.
Absolutely, so we'll look
we'll
forward to
all-
speaking points.
We will all have
on this.
assignments.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to director's reports. SAPA.
SAPA set a record for short meeting with a 5-minute meeting yesterday. There was really very little business on the agenda.
Thank you. The Met update, we have our meeting next week, but I've been spending some time going over their budget and what that means, and we'll be having some conversations with staff on that and what it means for the rates and a variety of different things, so.
Yeah, this is the hot topic at Met.
Yes.
They've proposed rates. It hasn't come to the board for action. There will be many workshops to try and understand the rate projections and then hopefully mitigate that a little bit because they've come forward with a proposed rate that exceeds their long-term projections and what we've all planned for in our budgets and our rates.
Yes, so much, much more to come on that. Okay, Chino Basin.
Chino Basin, Matt took care of routine business. There's really nothing remarkable to talk about at this point.
Thank you. CDA?
Sorry, I just totally, tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. RICRA?
So we had a meeting last Thursday. We authorized administrators to increase a purchase order for sodium hypochlorite, which is the chlorine, in the amount of $340,000. We received and filed the quarterly order control practice report. Usually it comes every month. December was a slow month. They had no reports. And then January was back up again. I think they had 20. And then we awarded a construction contract in the amount of $351 and $2,003 for the odor mitigation project. That is a very important project that RICRA has been working on. And then there was another, the anaerobic digester number 3 project. We awarded the contract for 600 6,719 and 380. So that was it, and we got an update for the McKinley Bridge project, that's going on, and then the recycle project committee that Greg talked about.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, WRCOG, we have a meeting next week. Some more to come on that. And Sarah.
We meet next month.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to director's comments. Director Rizvi, any comments today?
Yes, just wanted to give my deepest condolences to Jeffrey Banger for the passing of his mother. Please convey our regards to. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Roden.
Whoops. Just wanted to thank staff, as always, for all the work that goes into these staff reports. And, you know, many times we go through them rather quickly, but you've so thoroughly prepared the backgrounds and, you know, all the details in the reports that it's understandable, and it just seems like it streamlines the whole process. So I just really appreciative of staff. And I suppose that we have a new acronym now, BWN, Big Water Now.
They got to come up with something better.
Don't memorize that.
No, you got to come up with something better.
Because
Yeah.
the new person on the dais, well, there's 2 new people on the dais, and one of them doesn't necessarily agree with that acronym.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
All right.
No.
Well.
So it may change.
No,
It
there will be a refresh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our communicator may think there's a better acronym.
Yeah, all right.
Well, I love the idea of it and look forward to whatever the board member component is for our agency and all of those participating. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Director Gardner, comments today?
Thank you. For anybody who hasn't heard, Tom Thomas, who is a former Upland Council member, served for 20 years. A former Chino Basin Water Master Board member, current president of the San Antonio Water Company, was killed in a bicycle accident recently. And it's a real loss to the water community and to City of Upland. He was active in a very wide variety of community-oriented things. And I would ask that we adjourn in his memory.
Oh, very sad news. Director Torres.
I wanted to wish everyone a happy Women's History Month, but I'm really bummed about that. Anyways, happy Women's History Month. I do want to point out that the ladies Oh, no, we almost had the majority. I was trying to count. I'm excited to see what our communications team has in store for that. I'm very proud to serve on this board with the majority of us being women and coming from different backgrounds and experiences. And then, of course, our staff, we have some powerful and amazing women that not just lead the way, but ensure that this agency keeps its mission moving. So have a wonderful Women's History Month.
Thank you very much. And just a couple of comments. I know we're getting ready to do a lot of budget workshops, and the board has committed to doing some workshops and caught up on and get some very detailed information. I know that's very labor intensive with staff to produce all of those, and certainly appreciate all of your due diligence in preparing those and giving and turning out that information to all of us. And I look forward to our next workshop. And just as a reminder to my colleagues, if you have an item, a topic, a subject matter that you'd like for staff to take a look at, to do a deeper dive into, certainly contact Mr. Miller and let him know what that is so we can bring that forward for our next workshop. But I know budget is going to be at the forefront of that before we move on to any other topics, so we can get that moving, and a lot of that will be contingent upon some Met stuff too. So look forward to all of that. So appreciate you guys hanging in there with the budget process, because it's going to be, it's always very interesting. Okay, moving on to future requests for agenda items. Any board member have any future requests for agenda items today? Okay. Mr. Miller, I do have one. If we could get an update on the MSR and where we sit with our agreements and subject matter with Rancho. That would be fantastic. Okay. All right, number 9 is items for you to peruse at your leisure for information in regard to any of those. Any questions that come up, please contact Mr. Miller. He will provide you the appropriate information for that. We have no closed session today on the agenda. Is that correct, Mr. Miller?
That is correct.
And confirm with legal counsel?
That's correct.
Great, thank you very much. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March 16th. Thank you very much for your participation today. Appreciate it, and have a wonderful day. We are adjourned. And adjourn in memory of
Tom Thomas.
Tom Thomas. Thank you very much.